Hey, I'm Game Master Mikey.
I'm Game Master Gillis.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is...
What are we playing?
Well, today, guys, we're going to be coming to you and talking about the difference between LARPing and tabletop gaming. We've got our special guest today. It's going to be Chris Chauvin. Chris, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your gaming resume?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, guys. This is Storyteller Chris. I've been gaming most of my life. I fell in love with role-play games or role-playing games when I was 6 or 7. Played the original Nintendo Final Fantasy. Haven't ever stopped. But I didn't know about tabletop or LARPing until I was a freshman in high school, and I just happened to be over at a friend's house, and his older brother came home and just started pulling out all this, costume and LARP weaponry and whatnot, stuff I'd never seen before. I was like, "What are you doing?" And he told me, he was like, "I'm doing this LARP thing. It's basically like role playing in real life." I was like, "What?" And believe it or not, I had never seen even like a D&D book or anything like that before.
No shit.
Yeah, before.
When you started LARPing?
Yeah.
No shit.
And
Really?
you'll remember this guy was Brian Casey.
Oh yeah.
I played D&D before I started LARPing, but I was introduced to LARPing as my first. You can role play with other people experience.
Yeah. Okay.
And then from there, I was like, wow, I got to get into this gaming thing. And I went to Books A Million, I think, and I found the 3.0 D&D Player's Handbook, and I opened it, and they have like all the sketches in the beginning and like this super detailed artwork.
The art pulls you.
That great picture of leather armor.
I was done. Oh my god! I was like, what is this? And I've been consuming all sorts of tabletop and gaming, role play nature. Like, there's pretty much nothing in the role play realm that I don't enjoy playing or getting into.
Awesome. Now, Gillis, do you have any questions for Chris today to start us off, or?
Well, sure. Like right off the bat, as a guy that's done a lot of tabletopping and LARPing, and you LARPed extensively, I know that you've done a ton of different LARPs and different LARP systems.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think are some of the biggest and most obvious differences, first off, as a player, first, and then as a storyteller, going from tabletop to LARP and vice versa?
All right, so the first thing, obviously, is that in LARP, it stands for live action role playing, which means that you are live acting your character, as opposed to tabletop role playing, where you are role playing actively, but you're at a table. And there's a lot of different types of LARP and different LARP styles, and we can get into that in a little bit. But in general, the main difference is the physical act of being your character and physically interacting with other people as their actual characters, with costumes, makeup, depending on the type of LARP you're doing, weaponry. It's, for a lot of people, it's a huge culture shock, especially if you do it for like a whole weekend. You're like, whoa, what is this?
Oh, yeah. Walking away from it after the weekend, you're...
Yeah, just mentally exhausting, physically exhausting. And especially if you are really, into your character or whatever, like, you've been a whole different person for a whole weekend.
Exactly.
As opposed to a handful of hours, and you're like, all right, you know what, guys, like, I'm tired, and like, I'm gonna go to sleep.
You have to, like, mentally decompress almost when you go back to work,
Yeah, but it's, you're playing tabletop, and it's like, all right, it's 11 o'clock, I'm tired, or whatever time it is, and go to sleep. You can do that at LARP. But there's people who are still going to be awake, and some of them might actually be waiting for you to go to sleep to come and get your character.
That's actually something, once I started, because this is what is actually my first game, my first LARP. I had to explain to people that, like, when I'm coming back to the real world and actually just come back to my life and going to work, that there's a part of my brain that's still, on the lookout for danger. That fight or flight is still there, and you can't turn it off for a couple of days.
Yeah.
You've got to actually, like, relax, chill out, go through. Somebody moves too fast, you're like, shit, where were...
It really triggers something primal, especially if you just came from like a really terrifying game where you really felt like you were in danger. Like, that stays with you. Like, your biology, has definitely been elevated to respond to these fast twitch stress situations.
And even that, it's like I find myself like slipping back into a character in my thoughts the first couple of days after a game, like leading up to the next one, like, hi, my name is Rogue and I'll be your server. Shit, my name is Gillis. I'll be your server today.
Yeah.
By the word of Harrow's 5 Ranch. He's your ranch. Side ranch. Side of ranch. What?
Yeah.
Nothing. Shut up. What do you want?
And I would say just the other big thing that's really a culture shock to a lot of people. It's two things really. One is that in general, your tabletop group is relatively small. Like, you would say that like 10 people in a tabletop group would be really, really big and probably unmanageable in most games.
Oh yeah.
Whereas 10 people at a LARP is actually really small.
That's extremely small.
Yeah. So there's going to be a lot more people there than you might expect. And I remember absolutely clearly my first LARP event ever. I was a freshman in high school. I've been bugging my parents for a really long time to like let me go. Brian Casey, he was like, I mean, look, I'll go and talk to your parents. Like, you need to, like, whatever.
Oh no, your son will be safe with us.
Right? Yeah.
No, right? Yeah.
Don't worry.
So I was eventually able to get him to let me go, and it was a Friday after school. We already had all our stuff packed. Of course, I didn't have any gear or anything. I had like a super cheap Party City costume that I was able to get a handful of days before. That was it. But we drove from the West Bank of New Orleans up to Fontainebleau State Park at Old Group Camp 1.
Oh yeah.
And we got there at like 4:30 in the afternoon or something, like really early.
Yeah.
For a player getting on site.
Sure.
And there were already like 60 people on site. Half of them were in costume. I had no idea what the hell was going on. I was like, I'm home. I don't even know why, but these are my people. This is where I need to be. And that was 19 years ago.
There's something about LARPing where it's almost like you're sort of born to it. It's not just about being someone who's into role playing, but it's about being someone who's into role playing, who has that adventurous spirit, and thrives being like stuck in a massive little group of people, and they can sort of like play the little in-game politics and things like that. And like
that's
have
true. It's either you like it or you don't.
Yeah, really.
And if you like it, you really like it.
I used to think like if you like D&D, you love LARP. But no. I've known plenty of people who do not LARP at all and don't like it that love D&D. And I will say I don't know a lot of people that love LARP that don't like some tabletop gaming in some capacity or another. But like,
and that's where most of us started.
But LARPing really is like it's different. It's a different subculture. I mean, it fits into greater nerddom, but it certainly is. You're a certain kind of role player. You're a certain kind of player if you like LARPing.
I mean, you get on site, and one thing I was watching, like my very first game, I was watching everybody kind of, greet each other, and it was very, very friendly group. Everybody was, hey man, I hadn't seen you in a month, and just happy to see everybody there. Gathered, didn't matter their in-play relationship. And then they were like bringing out the totes, and everyone was really organized for the most part.
Yeah,
and just like breaking it down. You're like, this person lives in this box, and the moment they'd like pop it open, go and change the costume, the person they rolled in as went away.
Yeah, and
then they just put on the new persona, and they were that persona for most of the weekend.
Yep.
I mean, there were points where you'd break character for this, that, and the other, but for the most part,
which is almost inevitable.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, and healthy. I mean, I think
yeah.
like if you're there for a whole weekend, it's good to like pop into the tent and like just like chill out for a few minutes with your friends and like break character for a second, like catch your breath and all that.
Yeah. Actually, it's really funny. I wanted to tell y'all a story, I think last night, but we didn't get around to it, and it's kind of about this subject. And it involves you, my friend Gillis.
Right.
So Gillis and I have known each other for a pretty long time, going back to the second LARP I ever played.
When we met, I was 18, I think.
Yeah, I'm about to be 34, so
I'm
17, 18.
Yeah, I'm about to be 35, yeah.
And at the time, I was super, super into my LARP character. You know what I'm saying? Like Chris Chauvin did not exist.
Yeah.
You would try and get my attention by like my real name. I wouldn't. I was like, who the fuck are they calling? Like, who's Chris?
Yeah, you're one of the people in the field that was more intense on RP, like for sure. Yeah.
And so so I was super into my persona. I was like super about playing my character and like being my character. Because that was one of the things I really liked about LARP is that I could really be somebody else. And I'm playing this like hero guy, and Gillis is a monster, and they took over the tavern.
Oh,
and this is at Old Group Camp 1, and so like the tavern, like it has the tavern, and there's like this little porch that's like a screened in porch, so it's kind of like a barrier, a natural barrier between the outside and the tavern.
I was an ogre.
Yeah. Oh God, do you remember this story?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I think I might have heard this one, but I'd like to hear from
our friend Megan tells it the best, actually. Because she happened to be there and was kind of more of like a side spectator. But I'm super mad because this ogre is in this thing with like at least one other monster. There's a couple of my friends who are bleeding. They might not even been my friends. It might have just been town folk. But like that was the kind of hero character I was playing.
Yeah.
And then there was people in distress in the tavern. Like it was a bad situation. I was trying to be this like good guy knight kind of thing. And we had this like standoff, and I'm just like, because I can't open the door because he's holding it with like plus whatever strength, way more than I could ever have, and I can't do anything because I can't actually get through the door, and it's in real life I can't break the things down to get to him, And he knows that he can't come out and fight me because I'm a powerful spellcaster. I'm just
Yeah, I'd
gonna
have
light
been
him
burnt.
up.
I was just a basic ogre. Yeah,
Yeah.
They said go out and harass the town. We're like, all right. They're like, lock them in the tavern to let them out. I was like, all right, but
Yeah.
I knew any one of them could have gotten out and like whooped my ass, but they couldn't get out. And
Yeah, so I go into this, like tropey heroic actor sort of like you come out here like blah blah.
him and Megan were both like chiding me through the door, like piece, like.
And then he just like stops, looks at me dead in the face. He goes, "You got a purty smile, boy." You're real pretty, boy. Why don't you turn around and smile for me? And I died.
He blushed. He actually blushed. Yeah. I was like, he looked so uncomfortable.
I don't know how I was able to like hold it together, but straight up, like he could tell that he had won in real life. In real life, he had gotten me, and like that ogre owned the town for a while.
Yeah, it's a. I'm not proud of this strategy, but sometimes you don't play sometimes you have to play the player and not play the game.
Well, I mean, in certain cases, especially if it's like with your friends.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and particularly back in the old world, the dark ages of LARPing down here. Actually, Gillis and I were talking about this on the ride over here. If I was monstering, especially if I was monstering against you, my boys on your mod, we're gonna be worse friends when the weekend is over because of this. Because I am trying my damnedest to kill you and make sure you do not win this mod.
Now, when we've got certain friends.
Even though you're my teammates.
Oh yeah,
It's like, it's the most fun.
oh yeah. No, because
We always monster together.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
monster together, and
Which is a good strategy too.
Yeah.
and y'all will send us out with just a very simple thing. They're like, nobody will probably do this, but go out there and see if you can convince people to do this one thing. We're like, okay, and we'll talk about it on the way, and we'll come up with a routine and come up with voices and make it fun. And next you know, we're like, we were only supposed to get 5. How do we have 10 people doing this?
Yeah. I seriously, the rain dance thing. David, you're one of your 2 chief storytellers. He sent us out, and I was like. He was like, see if you can get people to water dance with you. I was like, no one's going to do this shit.
Everybody knows
I
best.
was like, no one's going to do that. The first 5 of 7 people we asked did it. I was like, what the fuck? Like, are you serious? Like, I'm not there telling them they're stupid. I don't know. Like, but blew my mind. Blew my
it
mind.
was like all 3 of us, me, Gillis and Tyler were there. And when we actually started doing it, we gave them every chance possible. We felt so horrible that they would actually, we're looking at each other just stunned. Like, who would come and do this? You know you're going to die, right? And no, they came and did this, and we're like, all right, water dance. Somebody set up a timer. Rain dance. Rain dance.
Bastard to my friends when I monster.
It's gonna rain blood. Babies coming from the sky. It's gonna wash the whole town away.
Oh, yeah,
What's funny
Rain
about Jordan is that it
dance.
was pretty obvious.
Yeah, we're like, I was like, it's gonna rain. The rain's gonna wash away all the babies, all the mamas. People just dancing. I'm looking at Mikey. We're looking at each other like, what the fuck? What are they doing?
Why
Like,
are you still here?
So this is really interesting because first of all, shout out. I've listened to all of your podcasts so far. They're great.
oh, thanks, man. Appreciate that.
I really appreciate that.
Oh, dude, I have so much commentary that I can go through. Whenever I heard Mikey talking about paranoia, I lost my mind. I was like, oh my god, LARPworks owns the Paranoia original game set. It's such a cool game. Oh man, so few people know about some of these things.
Oh, paranoia is it's classic.
Yeah, but one of the things that you were talking about, in your game mastering episode about doing linear versus more open kind of
Sandbox.
Just the various types of games you can run. It's interesting because in tabletop games, a lot of times that can very quickly, as you discussed, derail a game session.
Sure.
Things can, especially if the players as a group want to do some really off the wall stuff. And that's kind of a bad thing in the general sense of hey, we're trying to play this game with a story, unless it's specifically designed to be hey, here's a wacky wild world, do whatever you want. We'll kind of wing it as we go, which I've done that before.
Sure.
But with LARP, it's actually a little bit different because the thing about LARP is that the world has a really finite amount of information in it, as opposed to the real world where there's an infinite amount of information, so we can never know everything. That's not the case in LARPs. Even some of the most highly developed LARPs, it is actually possible to know everything in the game. And then for myself and a couple of the other actual creators of the story and the system from the ground up, like even if we don't know something immediately, we know enough about how the world works in a metaphysical sense that if we were the over deities of the universe, that we could like make these things happen.
Yeah.
So when players try to go like off the cuff, or they try and do something that is really outside the box, and particularly with the way that we do our staff, it's really not that big of a deal so much because there's only so many things that you can actually be doing, and all of our stories one way or another run into another story. So you want to talk to that weird goblin in the tavern or whatever, because why? You just are more interested in talking to the goblin than going to defeat the big bad evil thing on the epic heroic quest,
Right?
Which I thought we were playing towards, but that's fine.
Yeah.
So in like your case, like you got to like, all right, well, let's come up with a whole bunch of stuff. Well, in the way that LARP works, particularly for our game, we have so many things already kind of developed, even if they're not like overt to the players, or they're in, they're not like a 200-page like game setting book. Like, okay, yeah, like that goblin, like you want to interact with, just off top, because of the way that we have stuff going, there's like 3 different types or factions of goblins that he can be involved with. Yeah. And just like 5-minute conversation, be like, hey, these crazy players want to go and do whatever with such and such and so and so. Like, all right, okay, well, like what do we got going on? Like, who hasn't been touched yet? Do we need to push a particular story? Like, blah blah. Like,
Yeah.
And then,
I mean, honestly, I feel like in my brain, I like to imagine that y'all have this like binder with this huge flow chart in it, to where if somebody decides that they want to like move this way and they're going to go this way, all you got to do is just tweak it just a little bit. Like, all right, where are we on the flow chart? All right, kill them all.
It's funny because I just cleaned out my van, and in it I had some of like the ancient Mordavia documents.
Oh no shit.
Yeah. Oh, we have some.
I heard the first iteration was like they were mailed out in booklets as the rules were being developed, kind of thing.
Sorta,
Like you would,
yeah.
You
Back
would,
in the
you would
development
tier
stage.
up to tier 4 of like this one thing.
Yeah.
And y'all be like, oh shit, and like have to write it real quick and like send it out to them, so to speak, or.
Well, it's because specifically the first iteration was a massive play test.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
we didn't want to just release all sorts of information, and we wanted it to be a lot more secret, especially because like like let's say like like Brian Pitts, right? Like let's say he got to a thing. Like for those of you who don't know, Brian's great. I've known him for a long time. He's like really good about the rules, mechanics, super honest.
Yeah,
and
he
fair person.
always knows every system like the back of his hand. He's always a fair player.
Yeah, and if you want,
he's a dangerous player.
Oh yeah,
but he's a fair player.
right. But
yeah.
if you
I like him as a person.
Yeah, but if
I
you
don't
want
trust him in game.
right? But,
It's
right.
smart. That's a sign of maturity right there. Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is as someone who I would trust to be like, hey, like look at this stuff, and then I could trust them to tell me like, hey, this thing's really busted. Like, this is the things I could do with it. He's that kind of person, and that was one of the other reasons why we did that, since it was a play test. Hey, you're the first person, and you're like your thing to get to tier 4 or whatever. Here, like, what do you think about these things?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because sometimes we had some stuff that was busted. Like,
Yeah.
And we wouldn't necessarily recognize it was busted until a player got it. Was like, hey, by itself this is fine, but when you add it to this other ability or this other magic thing that I have, like it does these things, and we're like, ooh.
See, these 2 guys sitting here at the table with you, we're actually not going to come back and go, we're going to do horrible things with that, because
I mean, hey, it's all right.
But we're going to do horrible things.
Well, I just assume you guys leave it in there on purpose. Like,
Yeah.
There's all kinds of, like, in every build, there's something busted you can do.
Actually, we were also talking about this right over here, is that if you take anything standalone in, like Mordavia in particular, and you're like, I'm going to build a level 25 whatever, and you like sit back and you're like, what can I do? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can. But then you have to realize that every other possible variation of a level 25 character
can
also do some crazy
similar
shit.
things.
Yeah.
And that's why if you like really look through the rule book, like, there's a lot of hard counters. And we're like, oh, you can do like whatever. Like, cool. Like, oh, you have infinite dodges? Well, not from the back, son. Like, whatever. Like, I'm just going to have my dude distract you from the front, and then just whatever I got to do to get you in the back that one time. You're
or
done.
like dwarves get true strike, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yes. Right.
The dwarf race. It's a dwarf racial true strike.
Or freaking like last iteration, they had a vampire play with Brian's character, actually.
Yeah, Alpo.
He almost became like the progenitor. He awakened his bloodline and had consumed every other bloodline except for one.
Oh.
And people were like, man, look, these vampires, like, they're so strong, like it's so like broken and blah blah blah. And I'm like, maybe the order had a point when they said you shouldn't let them live too long because they get too powerful and have to eat people to survive, to a point where they're eating souls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate balancing factor. Like, I mean, because it's a LARP and not a tabletop game, it's easy for one character at a tabletop game to become kind of imbalanced compared to the other 3 or 4 people at the table, you know? And at that point, it ultimately becomes the GM's job, the game master's, the DM's job to balance out that player. But at a LARP, I mean, not so much, you know? Aside from the other factors, like with the role play, where I think a LARP is both a sandbox and a linear at the same time, because you've got, like, a never-ending, continual plot going on. But you can also just kind of like go off and do whatever, you know, like at the same time. But
only so much.
Well, I mean,
our
by
game
and large,
our game is specifically designed to be a bit more sandboxy, just because we didn't want to have people be like, "Hey, I need to go halfway across the world right now to talk to whoever is super important, and then come back." And then in real life, only like an hour has passed. Which I've played LARPs like that. I actually don't. I'm a LARPer. I've played all the types of LARPs. Like I'm good with all the systems. But for what we're specifically trying to do and portray with Mordavia, especially, that's not the narrative that we want.
Well, I mean, in terms of RP, like you're not trapped in a story arc. I mean, like there are linear, ongoing story arcs taking place that you can take part in, or you can just go off and set up a shop and be a merchant and have your own store and things like that.
Yeah.
Or just craft.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, do
but
whatever.
also, if a player starts
still
to
be
get
viable
broken
in the game.
Yeah, if a player starts to get broken as a player, it's really more the responsibility of the 30 or 40 other players who aren't on your squad to balance you out. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and then we'll check you.
Yeah.
Well, theoretically,
They'll try. They'll try.
They'll try like hell.
If you do it right, they don't even know that you're that busted. I mean, like, but they'll try. But it's their responsibility at that point.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's one of the things that we've tried to build into the game is so, you know, in lots of other games, like, oh, I've got 20 levels on you. Like, there's nothing you can do. Like, there's just nothing. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
But in this game, there's some hard counters. So, oh, you're a level 25 vampire? Well, chances are you still take double damage from holy. So we'll just start there and get all the white casters chucking nothing but 10 holies at you. If you happen to survive hundreds of points of mana of 10 holy, you're probably the most badass vampire there's ever lived, and you deserve to kill us.
Not to mention, there's a group of bearded guys that throw a whole lot of holy.
Right. Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, if you just have like 10 people or 5 people each blow 10 mana at like the same vampire on, by the way, get 5 holy. I mean, you're talking about like
you'll obliterate multiple vampires.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so, and actually, this is a good point because it goes back to one of the like big differences between tabletop and LARPing. Is you're physically doing the thing. You're physically doing the thing.
Yeah.
So if you are not actually good at doing your thing, it doesn't matter what your level is. You be level 100. Like if you don't remember your spell verbal, that little thing's coming up and be like poke poke poke. You know, and that's actually something else in our game. Like I don't care what level you are. If you've never you're a Zana or an elf, or a Zana in particular, you've never spent a single point in Constitution. You know how much HP you have? 6.
6. Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
Like first or not first level, but like starting
the
characters,
struggle is real.
particularly like
the struggle is real.
Fighters,
yeah.
Like they just gotta enrage one time, hit you once, you're dead. Like,
and like for me personally, I'll be honest, I'm 43. I'm not going to go out there and chase any of the 20-something-year-olds around. I'm not. I smoke. I'm overweight, and they're faster than me. So I looked at myself. I'm like, what are you good at? I'm good at throwing things at people.
Yeah.
And it worked for my build. And there's actually times if I find myself on an open field, you know, Tim's quick. I would not want to get into actual like melee combat with him, but range combat, I would just like, I saw him run across the field and just like, plick, plick, just toss things at him all day. I can do that. Not everybody can throw like that. There are people like Chuck who are just great at melee combat because it's live. You're actually there. Play to your skills. And it's so wonderful to actually be in a situation where, as a 43-year-old man, I can actually go out there and actually be effective without having to run down a 20-something-year-old.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't run down a 20-something-year-old when I was a 20-something-year-old. I mean, honestly, like, look, man, if I'm monstering, I might have the most badass stats that they might have given anybody like at that monster shift. But if you can sprint up those stairs and you won that encounter. I mean, at least you certainly are not threatened by that encounter. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I'm only so fast. Like,
so we have a question from the audience. They want to ask Chris about when people go so hard with their character creation and backstory that it doesn't quite fit into the universe plot is created, and now they have to meld the two together.
Ooh.
Wait, hold on. So what's the question in that exactly?
Basically, okay.
What happens when then?
Like, for example, when a person has a character creation and like their backstory doesn't quite fit into the universe.
Okay, I see. All right. Well, so for LARP in particular, really for LARP in particular, you should definitely look at the setting and the story and the world that you're getting into, because that's the baseline of what the story from staff and from most of the other players is going to be. And so you get a framework of, kind of what you should be doing. Like if you want to play some, futuristic cyberpunk, cyborg thing or whatever, that's probably a really great character. However, in your futuristic space cyberpunk scenario, it doesn't work for a fantasy game. But that being said, if you wanted to have, we could break down or this is at least something that I would do with people who are really set on a concept, because it's like, well, what is it about this cyborg, space police guy that you like, and then just really oversimplifying the process. Be like, well, cool, we have a race called Created. They're like, metal people, kind of super orderly for the most part. They have these various advantages that can go and kind of emulate the idea that you have for your concept. And when it comes to specific history things, unfortunately, sometimes the history just can't go as you want it to. But we try to incorporate, same thing like with concepts of the character. There's so many options within the game that we have on the back end where we can kind of plug you in to things that already exist that incorporate into the greater framework of the world and the setting. But really, to mitigate that, and I think this is really also kind of true for tabletop games as well, is you should kind of know about what it is that you're getting into as far as the setting that you're going to be playing in before you decide that I want to role play this character and then try and play that character in any game that you come across.
Because it's not just like the actual setting of the game. There are some characters that, as a character concept, it just takes a special level of dedication or isolation to play at a LARP. Like at a tabletop, I mean, like the edgelord Batman type character at a tabletop. It's like, oh, that sounds cool and fun. But if you play the edgelord solo lone warrior Batman type at a LARP, it means you're practically literally hanging out by yourself all weekend off in the corners. And
you're a walking target.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much,
and you're probably not going to get the action.
Yeah,
that your
some
Batman
things just don't
has,
fit, and you guys do roll through and
you're not the only character.
Read and approve backstories, right? I mean,
so we have. So this iteration is a little weird because we tried to implement the Destiny system, because I've been guilty of writing super long, detailed backstories for LARP. But I determined over time that really that's most important for me talking to you and us talking about our characters and the things that make our characters have depth. And for that, really, you just basically need a plot approval. Be like, yeah, this is all right.
Yeah.
But some people took it to be like, oh man, I have all of these people in my backstory, and I've got 7 brothers and 3 sisters, and I come from this huge family. I was like, that's great. I want to know about those things. However, don't ever expect me to remember all these people. Don't ever expect the rest of staff to remember all these people, let alone expect 7 people from staff to come and play your whole family.
Yeah.
Because you're not the only character. There's so much other stuff going on. And as far as the LARP goes, and this is a distinction, and we had a little trouble kind of explaining it in text form. In your tabletop games, your backstories are ultra important because that builds up where you're going to go in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
In our game, in our story in particular, where you came from is less important than the fact that you're a heroic soul and you are inevitably destined to be at this place that you cannot get out of except for very extreme circumstances, because you are intrinsically tied to the fate of the universe.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that vein, the backstories aren't as important because it's more about what you are going to do in the future as your character that you actively develop and have dynamic choices within the game world with all these other moving parts, which to most of the rest of the players, even your backstory like whatever. Like doesn't mean anything to them. Like, oh,
Yeah.
your grandpa is the freaking king. Great, fuck that guy. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, your backstory is a
whatever.
conversation piece. You know?
Yeah,
exactly.
and-
And
Yeah.
it's more for depth. Like I said, I think we had a little trouble describing that, and some people had kind of a hard time grasping to the destiny thing that we were trying to kind of convey. So that's on us. But in general, for our style of gaming with Mordavia in particular, the backstories are not as important for us driving plots. That being said, we have our stratified level of storytelling, and our lowest level of permanent storytellers are actually in charge of by our directions. Like, hey, here's a group of characters who have similar themes in their backstories, or here's a group that actually has a group backstory. Take that and run with it. And we were going to be doing a little bit more of that this year before certain things happened to really truncate our game time. But in the future, we're going to have a healthy balance between completing people's character histories, but within the context of the destiny of the world that we are trying to achieve. And we'll just have to work a little bit better with the community interaction.
Now, and as far as the question goes, like when these things do get out of hand, this goes back to one of our earlier rules in the earlier podcasts. Do your homework. If you're getting into a game and you've got to come up with a backstory, read the book, read the history, read about the world, read about the races, figure out where you fall in, because it's real easy to come up with a story that you feel great about and that you really like and makes you feel important. It might not fit in the world. And if you don't do your homework and understand, you're going to you're welcoming disappointment into your life.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, I need butt hurt. So do your homework. That's really the most important thing. So yes, it might fit into the world. No, it might not be acknowledged within the story, but at least have something that fits into the framework of the game that you're going to play.
It's almost like the LARP version of having a session 0. Like, there isn't a session 0 at a LARP, but there's an open forum in which you can talk to people. Ideally, you can talk to other people that have LARPed or have LARPed this game, so you can kind of get an idea. But I mean, if you think about, let's say, every player at game, like we got up to like 100 players at Mordavia, like this iteration, right? I mean, like, imagine
I think
if
we had 92 or 94
I think it was,
players on site.
Yeah, like, I mean, imagine if just
15
every
staff.
single player got one mod, just for their backstory.
Yeah.
That in and of itself would be a logistical nightmare.
Yeah, there'd be no story.
You
It
would
would
have to
just be us running
pause. Exactly, you have to pause
personal
so
mods.
many other things, like that. I mean, it's just not practical. I can't tell you how many players I've heard from like various LARPs that I've played that have said like, well, I'm not getting a whole lot of personal story attention. It's like, of course not. Like they can't do personal stories on like some grand level. I mean, they have to do story that everyone can jump into, because if not, like, you're leaving people out inherently.
Yeah, and in particular for Mordavia, since we try to structure it as a survival game, doing the solo gig, it's almost not genre savvy at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how strong you are. And actually, this is actually one of the kind of the philosophical stories. It's like, oh, Maribus is so strong. He's like, who knows how many levels, blah, blah, blah. You can do all this stuff. Yeah, but he still needs the players to actually accomplish his goals.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter how strong he actually is. It's like you guys that are the ones that actually get stuff done. And it's about moving forward in the game story, doing the story and making the choices based on who your character is, based on what their back history was, not playing the game based on their back history to complete some personal quest in particular. Not to say that's not important, but you're not playing the Gillis's quest of Rogan. It's Gillis playing Rogan in Mordavia.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're playing your character, which is your concept to make, your character to make, but you're definitely playing it within the context of the world in which you're playing that character.
Yeah, you've got to.
Like, you're not
Sometimes you have to stay in the
shoehorned,
box.
but you do need
Yeah.
to play the character in the context of the world. That's
Exactly.
setting, like.
And y'all leave a lot of room for it. Now, actually, I've got a question for you, and it's
Bring it, man.
you do
That's
have
the age
you've got a team, and anything larger than one person, there's going to be disagreements and trying to decide how things are going to work and where you go. How do you, starting with a team of, the main guys on plot and then breaking down to different levels of plot, really get a concrete idea of where you want to go and where you want to take the story?
Oh yeah, what's it like when GMs agree who have equal say? That sounds
that's-
crazy
when they
awkward.
agree?
I mean, when they don't agree. I mean, like,
Okay,
yeah.
good. 'Cause I
I'm
was
sure
about
when
to
you
give
all agree, it's just like
I was
another
about to give you a
fucking,
Babylon
like,
5 reference about when all the Minbari agreed and they almost extincted the humans. Like, that's what happens when we all
Instead of
agree.
humans, players, fair enough. Yeah, like.
Okay, so
Yeah, actually, I've noticed when y'all all agree, a lot of us die.
yeah. All right, I'm trying to think about how best to word this. Okay, so the story of Mordavia overall is already kind of pre-written, in the sense that it's a series of volumes of like small books that if the players never interacted with the story, these are the things that would happen.
Right.
But as even the game stresses to you as heroic souls, you are the spinners of fate. You are the weavers of destiny. Like everything that's going to happen of significance in the universe is really on your shoulders. So in general, the overall end story themes and concepts are pretty solidified, and everybody on staff kind of comes into staff knowing what that is. It's then they get on staff and get like some of the nittier, like grittier details. But it's an existential survival game, and there's lots of different creeds and philosophies, whatever way you decide to go, that you're pretty much staking your character's existence on, and you're staking your identity on that. And within the story, every single thing and every single person, every single ideology, philosophy, tradition, etc., is being challenged by something. Because that's how real life is. Like everything is challenged all the time. Like being challenging is, or being challenged is the most universal experience amongst humans that there is. And we try and bring that into the game setting. So in that sense, the things that we tend to disagree on the most aren't the stories and whatnot. It's more of like the how we think we should try and approach a particular problem, or like let's say we're trying to egg the story into a particular like kind of direction. We might have some disagreements about the methodology, about what we do, what we might say at certain times, like what players, what NPCs will kind of try and go after. Because like we might still do all of that plan, but after talking about it, I was going to come out as whoever on Friday night. But instead, I'm going to come out Saturday night after Matt and Teddy do their own things within the same storyline. So there's this extra layer of dichotomy that's already been played or placed into the system before I come in, as opposed to if I went in first, there wouldn't be a counter argument to anything that I said, and I would have the first mover advantage of being the one to manipulate the narration, which from a storytelling standpoint isn't what would have been best, because we're trying to push the story of what's happening and get some of these gray areas involved and make people have hard choices. And if this first NPC came out, it would eliminate a lot of that agency, because the players, for whatever reasons, would be more inclined to just latch on to what this guy's saying,
right? Yeah.
Versus hearing these other things. So that's really where our disagreements come down to. And with that said, we have 3 levels of staff, and it's pretty hierarchical in that sense. Like you can pretty much overrule the people below you, but there's a lot of oversight for the most part in the general ideas of things that are happening. And we at the top pretty much trust our people below us to be like, hey, here's the things we're trying to get accomplished. Like, you want to do these mods, like, cool, just make sure that you drop this information, tie it into this story, etc. And that being said, in other games and whatnot, when the upper echelon of decision makers like really, really disagree on stuff, like it ends up like destroying games, destroy staffs.
Shit.
Like
Yeah.
If you just go back and like casually look at the history of like it's hard to tell from like looking at the game as a game, but if you're like involved in the community, like know various people who have gotten into like various head staff positions and whatnot. Like there's people who like aren't friends anymore. Like there's people who stopped the hobby completely.
No shit.
Like
Wow.
like people who have just been so soured because of having to deal with the stress, particularly with dealing with their friends who are also in charge of making decisions.
Well, I mean, like when you're dealing with a story, that's something that's, I mean, it's creative, so it becomes very difficult to share if you don't understand how dynamic a story can be. And when you're dealing with something this large, you can actually break it apart and let people have different parts of it, and that way you can come back together and talk about it without having the main control of the entirety of the story. Because if I had to share an entire story with someone else and we had to share ideas over the entire thing, of course we're going to have disagreements. But I was just curious, like, because there's so much going on, and I see individual mods and storylines going on and whatnot, and I've always wondered how they come to an agreement.
So actually, you know where our staff disagreements actually focus on the most?
Dwarves.
No.
Okay.
It's within rulebook work, because like we're all so like passionate, and we're like, you know, we have so many game types and designs like under our belt, and like there's so many things that are technically valid, but we're trying to figure out what works best for Mordavia specifically, and like we'll have like arguments that last multiple hours on the wording of certain spells and whatnot, just to make sure that it fits perfectly. But when it comes to the story, when it
Someone's fucking cruising. Yep, that's right.
When it comes to the story, it's fairly well developed, and that's something that we've kind of been blessed with, particularly with the staff that came on to start this iteration. Mm-hmm. They all played last iteration. Like, they were in love with the story. They knew what was going on. They knew what they were getting into. They wanted to, you know, perpetuate certain things within the game world that they didn't, either they really liked or they didn't get to completely like experience themselves.
Yeah.
So we're really lucky to, for the most part on that side, not have too many problems. And the couple times that we do, usually the one that has the most formulated plan and is ready to like roll is the one that like takes the precedent, because it's like, no, I don't think you should do whatever. And unless I've got a really, really good reason, like a super good reason, everybody knows like the kind of situation I'm talking about. Like, we're like, no, literally this, you cannot do this. Yeah. If it's just like I have an objection because I think it could be done better or whatever, like you're already ready to go, you got the squad, like y'all be like, bro, you're out the door, you already have the stats, like we just roll with it, and because the game is super dynamic, like we just let dynamic stuff happen and then deal with it at the end. Like,
and sometimes it works out, sometimes it just peters out. And
yeah, and then of course this is back end stuff. We have the staff journals, where at the end of every episode we are writing down the things that we did, the PCs we interacted with, the stories that we did, the loot we gave out, stuff the PCs told us. And then for the chronicles, like myself in particular, and then Matt and Heath, we like sift through that information so we can see moving parts along the entirety of the game.
Okay,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take a break, guys. We'll be back here with you momentarily.
All right, and we'll see you in a few.